one of the ones that I wanna like hone in on was that there has been some elements of each season going to the next one. So, for example, very, very briefly, season 24 was Ethereals, and there was this really crazy two-handed weapon for the Demon Hunter, the Bariza, from Diablo 2. And what they did on it was the effects, right? The crowd control effect. And we can see that let me, I guess, is it clear that I have that here? It might not. Let's see. Yeah, I might have to move for temporarily. Let's move that temporarily. So what I was referring to just 10 seconds ago regarding the Bariza effect, as you can see down here in the how many lines is that? One, two, three, four, five, six, seventh line. If you can recall, or if you have not played season 24 Ethereal for the Bariza, it had this line, and so this is season 25 now, and they brought an element over. And I think this is going to be somewhat of a trend to keep something going, but at the same time, they could skip a season or two, or they could come up with something totally different. However, um, it is both of them. They are doing two different things. However, one of them is pretty similar. Now, the Soul Shard level 3 could be an augment for our ancient gear to get these 625 main stat. So in this particular patch, PTR 2.7.3, what they're doing here, let me jump to the spot. So over here, it says in this Echoing Nightmare, which I'm just going to jump ahead of myself and talk about it because I went into augments and I want to show that they are somewhat keeping an element from a previous season, so to speak, in a different way, but there is some, remnants of it so that it maintains the quote speed or availability to maintain that feel that it didn't change as much as you would think or one would think. So here, in these echoing nightmares, uh, in the patch in the notes up above, will kind of summarize or briefly explain what an echoing nightmare is. However, uh, it says here players receive the following rewards upon completing an echoing nightmare: EXP, legendary items, blood shards, gems, and a new legendary gem, Whisper of Atonement. The Whisper of Atonement is a legendary gem used exclusively for augmenting ancient legendary items. It drops pre-ranked based upon players' performance in the Echoing Nightmare. So, this without going into further into detail what I'm going to talk about based on that uh down the road after I talk about I've totally exhausted that. Let's and I know I can go on for like an hour for each one, and this is something that's always at the back of my mind about that. But let's go ahead to talk about the the one thing that I read early on while I was scrolling through this patch notes for the PTR 2.7.3, which is the Whisper of Atonement. So I'm going to reread again. Players are going to receive in these on the completion of these echoing nightmares. And I don't think I want to talk about echoing nightmares per se, because I want to see what I'm actually going to be facing um in a few days, when I do most likely will try the PTR, so that I can get a better understanding of what this echoing nightmare is. And I'm pretty interested because I've been playing a different game, and I'm not going to like go too far, but I would say that my friends have been telling me that they're like way ahead of me in that other game. And I've also watched people play those that content, that specific kind of content, that makes me think of what these echoing nightmares are is a possibility of what it is. And in summary, it's like percentage progression. I mean, I mean, that's very vague, and that's very similar to GR or something like that. But I think of it as percent progression kind of thing. But when your character dies, when you rip, it kicks you out. And then the Whisper of Atonement is a legendary gem used exclusively for augmenting ancient legendary items. It drops pre-ranked based upon players' performance in the Echoing Nightmare. So that is what I was getting at, right? Once they kick you out, you're done, and it's a percentage progression. Or we can think of it as the time trials from a long time ago, and they just name it differently, where it could be every floor is like a determined number between 1 to 15, for example. So floor 1, if you complete floor 1, between 1 to 15% means that your gem is between 1 to 15. Now, do we really want to start from 1? I mean, from, well, 0 to 1 to 2 to 3. Or they could be like the soul shards, where they start at 25 for, um, yeah. So it depends on what they decide, or we will see in the next few days what they decide pre-ranked the starting would be. Whether it starts from 0, just like when you're upgrading a gem and you're spending the least gold expense and whatnot, and then depending on your percent progress of each floor, that it determines based on percent. However, now if we're talking about percent, and that is why I jumped into something that I didn't mention um when I was discussing with my friends, um in terms of just pre-reading this patch patch notes to prepare for today. Um, One thing I thought about just like in the last like 5 minutes was that, imagine if each floor, right? So just now I just said that I just kind of like um slipped into that train of thought. So I slipped into the train of thought of, what if each floor had a determined variance. So if you complete floor 1, it's like 1 to 15. If you complete floor 2, it's like 16 to 40. If you complete floor 3, it's 41 to 75. Floor 4 is like 76 to 105. Floor 5 is like 106 through 120. And then for 7, it's 121 plus, and so on and so on. So each floor could mean, um in terms of just how much the ranking would be, right? So that might be one interesting way that they can approach that. And that's something I thought about only the last, you know, the last several minutes that I just had a thought about that. Yeah, so I'm just making brief notes about the timestamp that I'm doing right now. So, and I'm taking a short break from overwhelming the discussion. Okay, so what do you think? Will it be floor 1 through 6 that it has a range of predetermined, well, predetermined range of the augment level? So floor 1, it could be 1 to 15, floor 2, 16 to 40, floor 3, 41 through 75, and so on and so on. Or it could be something totally different that I don't know about in terms of, or that I'm not as creative. So we will find out. But what I was getting at with um, discussing or wanting to discuss about um, this pre-ranked based upon players' performance is that there are two schools of thought, or there are two different things that I've observed over the course of uh, gear checking and just looking through leaderboard, is that there's two kinds of ways to augment your gear that I've noticed. One is the usual level 100s that people are doing, and now this season is a flat 125s, right? Because of the level 3 soul shards. So people normally do 100 level augment gems for all 13 or however number of ancients that they get. So every ancient they augment it to 100, and this season is obviously 125 from the soul shard recipe at level 3. Now, the other school of thought, or the other style that is different, but it has its um it has its it has its own reasoning behind it. And the other one that I want to talk about has something to do with this based on players' performance. So in the beginning of a season, some people are super competitive, right, at their games. So it's all about getting fastest to 70, getting on the leaderboard right away. Um, Especially if you know your class, if it's or if it's a different class and you challenge yourself to go on the leaderboard as soon as possible, as early as possible. Then when you get your gems, your main gems all to 25, and then you start performing really well, and then you're like, well, I want to work on an augment gem that early, like, because you know that once you get 25 for your main three gems, you're pretty much good to go. Every bit is just gonna be, you know, it will help you more and more in terms of time saved, right? Because time attack is what there is to do, and that's how you do speed GRs. But let's say you want to work on your augment like ASAP. So for the seasonal journey, especially, you only need to do one augment, right? And some people do that really early in the season. So let's just assume that you didn't want to do it too early, but at a reasonable um number. So let's say it's a level 80 gem, a level 80 augment, both for your season journey, that one particular thing you need to achieve for the season journey, and then you also augment it just because every augment helps, right? So you would augment 80. And that is what, based upon players' performance, if we just cut and make it really sound really dry, that based on upon player's performance, meaning that if you pushed all the way to GR like 90 and then you do your speed GRs in your own way, that you would rank that first level 80 gem, and then that's your augment. So that's based on player's performance in a small nutshell, but not like totally it, because if it's based on player's performance, it means that your gem is the highest of what you pushed, right? Or what you have done in this echoing nightmare that's about to be in season 26. So level 80 gem is your first augment. What is the next one? In this early season leaderboard or speed kind of style, for it's called, I call it progressive augmentation. And what that is so your first gem is 80, level 80, well, 80 augment, whatever. It's so hard to say because people have different terms for their augment gem. So let's say it's 80 as the first one. What is your second one? The second one could be a 92. So if you've looked in the early stages of the leaderboard, there are some people who have augmented weird numbers. Well, that is the progressive number. So the first augment could be 80, the second augment could be 92, the third augment could be 102, the fourth augment could be a 106, and so on, right? That is called progressive augmentation to me, and that's how I've been terming it. And it's someone could have coined it earlier than I have, but in any case, I call it progressive augmentation, and I've always been saying it that way throughout uh, the last 5 years or whatever. I call it the progressive augmentation. And progressive augmentation is the same as the Whisper of Atonement, such that your performance in these echoing nightmares will make you consider whether you're going to augment in the same way that progressive augmentation is. So you would get a pre-ranked drop if you performed all the way to floor 3, which I said was what, 41 through 75. So if you got down to like the last bit of floor 3, you would get a 70 gem or a 75 gem or whatever, right? That's your first augment gem. Then the next time, in the next 2 hours, you manage to get another one to open up another echoing nightmare, and you went further, and you got through to floor 5 or floor 4 or whatever. So floor 4 would have been 76 through 105 or something, so you got 96. So then your first augment was 75, and then now your next one is 96. So you're kind of like turning this pre-ranked based on players' performance like a progressive augmentation style, that there are certain players that have been playing that that way to augment. And then the other one, like I said, is to have just everything at 100 or 125 in this season. Or there's a third way. The third way is how I would do it, and some people would agree too. It's based on the longevity, or how long you determine you're going to keep the item. So for example, just like this third way that I have been doing is basically very similar to what we call, or what certain websites call, perfection, or perfection percentage of your ancient item. So based on the perfection of the item, I augment it a certain way. And I call it a baseline augment. So when you do 100s or 125s this season, that's your baseline augment, because that's your first augment for any of your slots, and you're going to set it as a base or a baseline. So that's what I mean. So in this third way that I normally augment my gear, anything that I get, I will augment it either 100 as a baseline for items that I'm going to change. Like, it might be the next GR that I get an upgrade, but I already did an augment. So, and I know that this piece will get changed because the stats are like, it's an upgrade at the time, but I know that there's not like the ideal stats yet. So, for example, gloves, it's missing, it's like a main stat vitality double crit line version, right? So I would augment that, like, let's say 100 or a 110, depending on whether I'm playing an S tier for that season. Then a 110 is not difficult, so I set the baseline to 110. And this season, the baseline for everyone is a 125. So that's going to be the case for this season, where everyone is just like augmenting their any gear. That's like, even if they're going to change it, they're going to augment it to 125 anyway, as long as they have the regular gems to support it, because now the regular gems take a sync, an intense sync, because soul shard level 3 is shouldn't be that difficult. If you don't want to use that soul shard level 3, and if you have enough embers to turn each soul shard that you get to level 3 that doesn't have the stats you want or that you don't care about, then you can augment every ancient that you get that drops. That's, I guess, if you really want to use it, that you just augment it to 125. So the tier listed method that I do is that based on the longevity or how long you keep an item, it increases by 10 or by 20 if it's a primal or a really near primal role. So if I know that I'm going to keep it for like a week or two, in terms of my experience on the game and on the set that I play, I know that I'm going to keep it for like a week, then I wouldn't put it onto the baseline augment in the traditional sense where the baseline is only a 100 or a 110. I would put it up by 10 increase. And then if it's a primal, I would do a 5 or 10 increase over that. So if I want to make it simple, in simple terms, my tier listed augmentation is the third way. The first way is the progressive augmentation. That's what is going to be happening with the Whisper of Atonement, most likely. The second way is that everyone puts a baseline of 100 on any ancient items or whatever tier that they intended to do as a simple fast augment per slot. The third way, which is my way, is 100 or 110 or 120 based on the on the longevity that you will keep using the item. So if it's a primal, then it's definitely a base 120, no question. I mean, obviously I work so hard to push a 120 and get a 120 augment gem. I'm definitely gonna put it on an item. Well, I guess if it's not an S tier build and I'm pushing 120 and I got a gem to 120 and it's hard work, I definitely want to put on an item that I'm gonna be using for like a month. I mean, obviously, again, RNG could give you the thing like in the next 5 minutes, but you wouldn't know that. It's hindsight. Hindsight is 2020, right? After that, the next GR, you saw the upgrade. Well, obviously, in hindsight, that it sucks. But in terms of keeping a usable primal, is something that you would expect that it's decent, but you wouldn't expect that you got another really good one. It could be ancient. It could be a normal ancient, but it's really good that it's above and beyond that primal for some reason. It might be those other stats that actually matter for the build and not just straight damage or something like that. I mean, it might be a bad comparison to do a primal versus a near primal, but still, based on the longevity, I would have between 100 to 120 augmenting. That's the third way. And I think that this particular Whisper of Atonement plays upon the method of the first way, the progressive augmentation, that people are chasing the leaderboard early in the season, and it will be treated as time goes on now because everyone starts the game or starts their season at a different time because everyone plays different games, everyone has different schedules. Um, you know, so this progressive augmentation does not only gonna it's not only gonna concern uh just the people that are chasing the leaderboard early on, but also as you progress, as you play more and more, that you go higher and higher for your gem, and that's how everyone does it. But a lot of people grind it out to get a baseline of 100. So this kind of changes people's or like teach people that a different kind of mindset as to how they augment their gear. And this is going to be based on players' performance. So in a way, it also teaches how they are playing the game that they will achieve their augment. So it's not just a repetition of GRs. Well, I mean, you repeat the echoing nightmare, whatever it is, and we'll see it um, in the next few days in the PTR testing. But the repetition is not the grind of speed GRs such a way that it takes away like the concentration necessarily because you know everything is gonna get one shot. You know those monsters in your speed GRs is gonna get one shot, whereas this is more like you actually work hard to get up to a certain point for your augment level. So it'll be interesting to see whether you enter 4-5 and you guarantee yourself a 100 plus augment, right? So something like that is an example. But if you only made it to floor 3, then unfortunately it's like at a max of 75 or something, right? So like that determines a change in the mindset of how we augment, uh, whether it's progressive or you want to stick to the traditional way. Now, I don't know if what it also means is that we're gonna have to use that. Like, I mean, it doesn't really say. I don't think I might have missed it, but I don't know if it's gonna change the way people will think about the difference between their. See, now this is why I'm talking about the floor one being a varying range of augment level because I just don't know what a simpler way would be because it would take forever, right? It's like an infinite dungeon kind of thing. If we take this thing as an infinite dungeon, how far down the floor do we want to go in order to get to where we're at? And that would be a grind in itself. Whereas if they did a varying range per floor, that would simplify and also make people, you know, really understand what their performance is like if it's based on, a couple of floors. So between floor 1 through 8 or floor 1 through 10, that you get a varying range of augment level gem of this Whisper of Atonement. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this augment section of Whisper of Atonement. I think I've exhausted it as well. Um, so, and I think I also briefly kind of talked about what an echoing nightmare seems to be explaining, because it says here, while within an echoing nightmare, the difficulty scales as players progress in the encounter. So, in simple terms of this, we can take it as like a tower defense game where you get waves of stuff. So, if I like to play a god DH, players can progress faster by defeating monsters quickly, right? So if I'm a god DH and it happens to be a trash wave, then a trash wave would be easy for me, right? But then the next wave could be elites, and that would slow me down. And then if it's a continuous thing, if they're turning into a tower defense concept, then uh it's gonna get harder and harder because the elites are gonna stall me and give me those arcane beams on the floor, and then it's gonna make a whole mess of this narrow hallway, whatever it might be, that it'll cause me to rip, and then it'll kick me out of this echoing nightmare. That could be one. The other is what I was been talking about, whether it's based on floors, just like to keep the essence of the game, is that some people don't even know what floor 6 of a GR is like because they normally get, they normally want to play only the first two floors or at most the third floor, right? And then sometimes when you do a harder push, it's like floor 4 and 5, but you wouldn't go down to floor 6, 7 or 8 before, right? Well, I've seen that because I like to s- I like to attempt, or some people like to attempt their pushes all the way through, at least one or